There's a saying in legal circles. A whispered warning passed between property lawyers like a ghost story around a campfire. Don't mess with tree law. Most people hear that and laugh. A tree? How bad could it be? It's just wood. Plant a new one. Those people have never met an arborist with a calculator. They've never seen treble damages turn a 5-figure mistake into a 6-figure catastrophe. They've never watched a man lose his home because he wanted a better view of a lake. Today we're diving into one of the most devastating cases of neighbor warfare I've ever documented. A 100-year-old oak, a chainsaw, and a judgment so massive, the man who swung the axe is now living in an apartment. This is the story of the tree that ate a house. Let's begin.
I need to start by telling you about the oak. Look, I'm not a sentimental guy. I don't name my plants. I forget to water things. But this tree was different. It was already standing when my great-grandfather bought the property in 1987. Based on the rings, and yeah, I know how many rings now, trust me, arborists estimated it was planted somewhere around 1920. Maybe earlier. 100 years of growth. 100 years of surviving storms, droughts, and whatever else nature threw at it. The trunk was so wide that me and my wife couldn't link hands around it. The canopy shaded half our backyard. Every summer, we'd have barbecues under that thing. My kids learned to climb on the lower branches. There were initials carved into the bark from people I never met, probably my grandparents' era. That tree was the reason we never sold the house. It was the property. So when I came home from a 4-day work trip to Denver, and I pulled into my driveway, and I looked at my backyard, I thought I was losing my mind. Like, genuinely. I sat in my car for probably 3 full minutes just staring. My brain couldn't process it. There was just sky. Where there used to be this giant, beautiful canopy, there was just empty sky. And in the middle of what used to be shaded grass, there was a stump. 4 feet wide. Fresh cut. Sawdust still on the ground. I don't remember getting out of my car. I don't remember walking across the yard. I just remember standing next to that stump, touching the wood, still rough, still smelling like fresh cut oak, and feeling like someone had punched a hole in my chest. My wife came out. She was crying. She told me it happened 2 days ago. She'd been at work. By the time she got home, it was done. Just done. 100 years of growth, gone in an afternoon. I asked her who did it. She pointed next door. So here's the thing about my neighbor. Let's call him Gerald. Gerald moved in about 3 years ago. Retired early from some finance job. Bought the place with cash. And from day one, Gerald was a lot. He complained about everything. My kids were too loud. My dog barked too much. My grill smoke drifted onto his patio. But his biggest complaint? My tree. See, Gerald bought his house specifically because it had a lake view. And it did have a lake view from the front of his house. But Gerald wanted to build a deck on the back of his house. And from that angle, my oak tree blocked about 60% of the water. He asked me to trim it. I got a professional to take off some lower branches, cost me $800. He asked me to trim it again. I said no. He asked me to cut it down. I laughed and said absolutely not. So Gerald, being Gerald, decided to take matters into his own hands. While I was in Denver and my wife was at work, he hired a tree removal company. Not a legitimate one, some guys with a truck and chainsaws who apparently don't ask questions like, "Hey, is this tree on your property?" He paid them cash. And in about 6 hours, they erased a century of growth. I walked over to Gerald's house that same evening. I wasn't calm exactly, but I wasn't screaming either. I just wanted to understand what the hell happened. Gerald opened the door with a beer in his hand. He was smiling. Actually smiling. He said, and I quote, "Oh, you're back. Listen, I know you're probably upset, but let's be reasonable here. That tree was a hazard. Branches could have fallen on my roof. I did us both a favor." I asked him if he was serious. He said, "Tell you what. I'll write you a check for $2,000 and we'll call it even. You can plant a new tree. One of those fast-growing ones. Give it 10 years, you won't even notice the difference. $2,000. For a 100-year-old heritage oak. I told him that wasn't going to work for me. He shrugged and said, well, that's my offer. Take it or leave it. And hey, look on the bright side, your property value probably just went up. More sunlight. Then he closed the door. I stood on his porch for a long time. I wasn't thinking about lawsuits. I wasn't thinking about money. I was just thinking about my grandfather sitting under that tree. My kids climbing those branches. 100 years of shade, gone because some guy wanted to see a lake from his deck. I walked home. I sat on my back porch. I stared at that stump. And then I opened my laptop.
Here's the thing about trees. In the eyes of the law, they're not just plants. They're assets, property. And depending on where you live, they can be extremely valuable assets. Most people learn about tree law the hard way, the way Gerald was about to learn. But our protagonist here? He was about to discover a legal rabbit hole that goes deeper than any root system. The two words that would change everything? Replacement cost.
So I did what any reasonable millennial does when they're facing a crisis. I went to Reddit. I posted on the legal advice subreddit. Just a venting post, mostly. Neighbor cut down my tree, offered me $2,000, what are my options? I expected maybe some sympathy. Maybe a few people telling me to file a police report. What I did not expect was my inbox exploding within an hour. Every single message said some variation of the same thing. Dude. You need to look up tree law. Your neighbor is screwed. Okay. Tree law. I'd never heard those two words together in my life. But I started reading. And then I couldn't stop. Here's what I learned. In most states, if someone destroys your tree without permission, you're entitled to the replacement cost of that tree. And replacement cost doesn't mean go to Home Depot and buy a sapling for $50. Replacement cost means, what would it cost to replace a tree of that exact size, exact species, and exact age? Spoiler alert, you can't replace a 100-year-old oak. They don't sell those at nurseries. So the valuation becomes theoretical. What would it cost if such a tree existed and could be transported and transplanted? The answer is, a lot. Like, a lot. But here's where it gets really interesting. In my state, tree destruction carries something called treble damages. If the destruction was willful, meaning the person knew it was your tree and cut it anyway, the court can award you 3 times the assessed value. So whatever that tree was worth, multiply it by 3. That's what Gerald owed me. I'll be honest. When I first read about treble damages, I didn't believe it. It sounded too good to be true. Like something made up by revenge fantasy writers. So I did more research. I found case after case after case. Neighbors cutting trees. Homeowners suing. Judgments that ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. One case in California, I kid you not, resulted in a judgment over $2 million for a grove of redwoods. That's when I realized 2 things. 1, Gerald had made a catastrophic mistake. 2, I needed a professional. I called every arborist in my area until I found one who had experience with legal valuations. His name was Dave. Dave had been doing this for 30 years. He testified in court dozens of times. And when I described my tree to him over the phone, the age, the size, the species, he got quiet. Then he said, "That's a heritage tree. I need to see the stump." Dave came out 3 days later with a measuring tape, a camera, and this giant binder full of valuation tables. He measured the stump. He counted what he could of the growth rings. He took core samples. He photographed everything. The whole process took about 2 hours. At the end, he sat me down on my back porch and opened his laptop. "Okay," he said. "Based on the trunk diameter, the species, the age, and the location, here's my preliminary assessment." He turned the screen toward me. I stared at that number. $87,000. For a tree. Then Dave said, and with treble damages in this state, you're looking at a potential judgment of around $260,000. I asked him if he was joking. He said, I've seen higher. This is actually conservative. I think I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so absurd. Gerald offered me $2,000. The tree was worth $260,000. That's a difference of. I don't even know how to describe that ratio. Dave agreed to testify if it went to court. He said he loved these cases. Arborists don't get many chances to be the hero, he said. Tree law cases are basically our Super Bowl. That night, I hired a property attorney. I explained the situation. I sent over Dave's preliminary valuation. My attorney called me back within an hour. We're filing suit, she said. And I think you should know, I've seen cases like this before. Your neighbor is probably going to lose everything.
There's a certain type of person who goes through life believing that consequences are for other people. They cut corners. They take what they want. And when someone pushes back, they're genuinely shocked. Gerald was about to receive the education of a lifetime. But first he had one more chance to avoid disaster. He didn't take it.
My attorney sent Gerald a demand letter. Very professional. Very detailed. It included Dave's full valuation report, an explanation of treble damages, and a settlement offer, $200,000, and we walk away. I thought that was generous, honestly. I was leaving $60,000 on the table to avoid a trial. My attorney said most people, when they see a number like that backed by actual documentation, get very serious very quickly. Gerald's response? He sent back a letter through his own attorney, some guy he'd clearly hired that week, calling my demand frivolous and extortionate. He counteroffered $5,000. $5,000. My attorney actually laughed when she called me. I love it when they do this, she said. It means we go to trial. And juries love tree cases. We filed suit the next week. I'm not going to bore you with every procedural detail, but here's the condensed version. Gerald's attorney tried to get the case dismissed. Denied. Gerald's attorney tried to argue that the tree was a hazard and Gerald was acting in good faith. We submitted 30 years of inspection reports showing the tree was perfectly healthy. Denied. Gerald's attorney tried to challenge Dave's valuation methodology. Dave submitted his credentials, 30 years of experience, 2 published papers, court testimony in 14 states. The judge accepted him as an expert witness without question. We went to trial about 8 months after the tree came down. Dave took the stand and explained, in beautiful detail, exactly how you value a heritage oak. He talked about replacement cost. He talked about transplant logistics, the specialized equipment, the permits, the survival rates. He talked about the ecological value, the property value impact, the historical significance. The jury was captivated. Like, actually leaning forward in their seats. Gerald took the stand too. His defense was basically, I thought it was on the property line. I was trying to help. I didn't know it was worth that much. My attorney asked him a single question on cross-examination, did you ever ask the plaintiff for permission to cut his tree? Gerald said, I didn't think I needed to. The deliberation took 2 hours. The verdict, liable on all counts. Willful destruction of property. Treble damages awarded. The judgment, $261,000. Gerald went pale. Like, actually gray. His wife, who'd been sitting behind him the whole trial, started crying. His attorney just stared at the table. I didn't feel triumphant. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just felt tired. And weirdly sad. All of this could have been avoided. He could have just not cut my tree. After the verdict, Gerald's attorney asked for a payment plan. My attorney agreed to accept monthly installments, within reason. Gerald agreed to pay $3,000 a month. Then the payments stopped.
$250,000 judgment is a heavy weight. Some people buckle down, accept responsibility, and pay what they owe. Others try to run. Gerald chose option 2. What he didn't understand, what people like Gerald never seem to understand, is that court judgments don't just disappear. They grow. They accumulate interest. And they come with a very specific set of tools for collection. Tools like property liens.
Gerald made 3 payments. $9,000 total. Then nothing. My attorney sent notices. No response. We tried wage garnishment, but here's the thing, Gerald was retired. No wages to garnish. His retirement accounts were protected under state law. But his house wasn't. We filed a judgment lien against Gerald's property. What that means, in simple terms, is that Gerald couldn't sell his house, refinance his house, or do anything with his house until my judgment was satisfied. At first, I figured he'd just wait me out. Let the lien sit there. Die of old age and let his kids deal with it. But I underestimated how badly Gerald had miscalculated his retirement finances. About 18 months after the trial, I got a call from my attorney. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she said. Gerald had filed for bankruptcy. Now, normally, bankruptcy is bad news for creditors. Debts get discharged, you get pennies on the dollar, everyone moves on. But there's an exception in bankruptcy law, several exceptions, actually, and one of them covers judgments arising from willful and malicious injury to property. My attorney filed a motion to have the judgment declared non-dischargeable. We won. Gerald couldn't escape. The debt followed him. And with interest accumulating, it was now closer to $280,000. His bankruptcy attorney laid out his options. There were only 2. Option 1, liquidate assets to satisfy the judgment. Option 2, forced sale of the property by the court. Gerald chose option 1. Barely. Gerald listed his house 6 months ago. The house he bought specifically for the lake view. The house he destroyed my tree to improve. It sold for $425,000. After the mortgage payoff, after real estate fees, after settling with me, Gerald walked away with about $40,000. From what I heard through neighborhood gossip, he and his wife are renting an apartment now. 2 bedrooms. No lake view. I got my full judgment. Every penny. Interest included. The day the sale closed, I went out to my backyard. I stood next to the stump, still there, too expensive to remove, honestly, and I just breathed. I don't know what I expected to feel. Victorious? Vindicated? Mostly, I just felt empty. That money didn't bring back my tree. It didn't bring back the shade, the memories, the initials carved in the bark. My kids can't climb a check. But you know what? As I stood there, I noticed something. Around the base of the stump, there were shoots. Little green sprouts. Suckers, technically, the tree trying to regrow from its root system. Oak trees do that sometimes when they're cut, but the roots survive. My arborist, Dave, says if I nurture them, one of those suckers could become a new tree. Not the same tree. Not 100 years old. But genetically identical. A continuation. It'll take decades. Maybe my grandkids will sit under its canopy someday. Gerald won't be there to see it. But I will.
There's a lesson in this story. Several, actually. Don't cut down trees that don't belong to you. Don't assume you can buy your way out of consequences with pocket change. And never, ever underestimate the legal value of a living thing that took a century to grow. Gerald wanted a view of the lake. He got a view of a courtroom instead. He wanted to improve his property value. He lost his property entirely. The tree is gone. But in the end, the tree won. And that, my friends, is why you don't mess with tree law. If this story kept you hooked, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We've got more tales of karma, consequences, and people who really should have known better. Until next time, the file is closed.